Good evening, guys. Usually when I make videos, they're scripted or I try to put some sort of thought into it, But there's thought in this subject that I'm about to talk about. I've put I've thought about this, right? I've thought about it in detail. But I haven't written it down because I think that it's something that if I spoke just from my heart, if I spoke just from my instinct, it would be best. Because the subject I'm talking about today, history, is something that I feel is best explained verbally. It's not best written down, even though I read history when it's written down, obviously. I love history books. I've got history books all around me, right? But I love it when someone can tell me their history knowledge. I love it. I love it when someone knows about very, very specific details about World War II or the Renaissance or the Middle Ages or something like that, the Crusades, the Roman Empire, any period of history, anything. If anybody knows anything, that's interesting or fascinating, and most of it, pretty much all of it, is fascinating, by the way, in some way or another. It's amazing. It's literally one of my favorite things in the whole world, just to see someone passionate about the past, about the building blocks to where we are now. We're in history right now, right? It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful subjects ever, And it's always been one that's fascinated me, right? I've never disliked history. I've always loved history in school, and especially self-studying history. I've always loved that, you know. Um, and I'm not an expert in history. I'm not an expert in history at all. I don't think that you can grade history. I don't think that you can grade a lot of people's, knowledge. And I don't think that grading and testing in school is a particularly definitive solution. I don't think that that's at all how anybody's knowledge should be perceived. Um, if you took all of my history knowledge, you probably wouldn't get much out of it, right? I know so little, and I will always learn. I will always learn about history. History is something that you will learn for the rest of your life. You will never know everything about history, and that's what I find fascinating about it. And that's why I think it's important to pick particular subjects in history, or branches of history that you find particularly interesting, because you're never going to learn everything. You're never going to learn everything. Even in your favorite periods of history that you want to learn about and that you're passionate about, you're never, ever going to learn everything. You can learn the key details. You can learn the very specific stuff. You can learn the key people, but you'll never learn everything. It's impossible. And that's another sad beauty about it. It's one of my favorite subjects. I love it. I love history. But the point I want to make today in this video is that I think I understand its purpose and why it's still taught today. From an academic standpoint and from a lot of different standpoints, I think that the reason history is so expansive is because, and not even just expansive, I just think that history is looked at very differently today. I think that people try to find a use in it. History is not a useful subject. Unless you're an archaeologist or a librarian or a historian of any kind, and I'm assuming that most of you aren't, history can seem very useless in the grand scheme of things, right? But I just realized right now, and I've never thought about this really before, that history, and any other subject for that matter, doesn't have to have usefulness. It doesn't have to be useful for it to have any worth. It really doesn't, right? I mean, you're not going to use history in everyday life, right? I mean, it's not important in that way. You don't need to use history to make a career or to make yourself better, even though I think that studying history does make you a better person, because knowing how you came to be and how your civilization came to form, and how all these countries and all these places and all these people came to form it as a whole, this planet, this fucking crazy planet that we live on, it's not useful. Particularly, it's not useful in the traditional sense, but it's still worth it. It's still worth it to learn about. So yeah, keep studying history. I think it's a very important subject for everybody to learn in some way, shape, or form. Regardless of its use. It doesn't need to be useful. Nothing needs to be useful, right? Philosophy isn't particularly useful, right? I mean, fuck it, man. Nobody who's studying philosophy in college, none of them are gonna get extremely high paying careers that directly involve philosophy, I don't think, unless you're a professor. But even then, I love philosophy and I love history. Those are my two favorite subjects, I think, or two of some of my favorite subjects. I absolutely love both of them to pieces. But I would never really use any of them in everyday life. I mean, obviously I'll meditate and I'll use some philosophical quotes. I'll think about them sometimes, I'll take it to heart, take it into consideration. But the point is that, yeah, you don't need to have a use. A subject doesn't have to have a use for it to be worth it. So yeah, keep it up. Keep studying history, keep studying philosophy, keep studying all those subjects, especially if you're passionate about them and you're interested in them. Don't let its use in today's environment of, oh yeah, it has to make you money. It doesn't have to make you money. If you find it interesting, pursue it. Okay? Just do it. Alright, thanks guys. See you later.